On today's video, we're going to talk about dealing with bad neighbors. If there's something that can ruin your life and your happiness, it's somebody next door or across the street who wants to give you a hard time. So in this video, we're going to talk about preventative steps that you can take to make your life easier. Number one is never get to know your neighbors. And I know that sounds like something that sucks, but in today's world and with the way people are, one of the best preventative steps you can take to have peace at home is to not know the people around you. You can be part of a community organization, you can get to know business owners across town, but within your immediate neighborhood, it is best to be to yourself. If somebody new moves across the street, you don't have to get to know that person. If they wave at you, you wave back at them. But by no means should you start to meet a bunch of strangers. After all, they're living right across the street. So you're going to get to know more about those people's lives than you would want to, even if you're not trying to. If somebody does say hi to you and try to start a conversation, you can end the conversation politely. You don't have to be rude. And if you've noticed that a new neighbor or somebody who's already next door is trying to be too friendly or they're trying to interact with you too much, you can politely let that person know that you're not friendly. This isn't gonna make this person like you, but it sure will let them know that they should stay out of your way and that there's no reason for them to come bother you or ask you to borrow a screwdriver or come over to your property, and they probably won't even wave to you anymore. And I know that sounds brutal, but it's actually a great coping tool with dealing with bad neighbors. We had a guy moving across the street, and on the first day, this guy came over 3 times to ask for different stuff. I finally told him, hey bro, we're not friendly. I don't hate you. I'm glad you have a nice truck. I'm glad you have a beautiful house, but we're not friendly people. So if you're over there and we're over here, it'll be good in the long run. And like I said, this isn't going to make you friends with your neighbors, but if you can keep a low profile and try not to make relationships or unnecessary contact, in the long run, it'll avoid like 90% of the problems you're going to face with your neighbors. If you don't open a window or a door into your life, then there's no way somebody can get into your life. At the end of the day, you're going to be living with close proximity to these people. So if a friendship or some type of mutual contact does develop in the future, you'll have plenty of time to evaluate whether they're people you want to associate with or not. And that doesn't mean you have to be a jerk or mean to all your neighbors. It just means that you have to slow things down and not move too fast. Number 2, and this one is pretty obvious. If you live in a poor neighborhood, bad behaviors and bad conduct and just a bad relationship with other people usually leads to poverty. So if you live in a poor neighborhood, the chances of you having to deal with scumbag people is increased tenfold. The money that you're going to spend on security cameras, German shepherds, fences, and the time you're going to have to take out of your life to deal with some of these people and their situations, you might as well invest that money into moving up into a better neighborhood where you won't have to spend time or money dealing with stupidity of other people. When you look at all the money that I spent on fencing, German shepherds, security, and other hassles, if I had just grabbed that money and moved into a better neighborhood, I would have used that same money for rent instead of cameras, German shepherds, fences, and time away from my life to deal with people's issues. So it really pays off to move into a better neighborhood where you don't have to spend time and money dealing with other people's crap. I've lived in poor countries, I've lived in trailer parks, I've lived in houses, I've lived in city neighborhoods, I've lived in suburban areas, I've lived in apartment complexes, and I'll tell you that there's a massive correlation between poverty and real estate values and the amount of crap you're going to have to take from other people. And usually, the more expensive and exclusive a community is, the less crap you're going to have to deal with from other people. That doesn't mean that in rich areas you're not going to have bad neighbors. I lived in a gated community in Naples, Florida for a little bit, and the guy next door was a complete nightmare, but he was the exception to the rule. The neighborhood where I live in now, your minimal income has to be $7,000 a month just to qualify to live in this community. That means that every one of my neighbors is making more than $7,000 a month. That means they probably don't have time to deal with other people's crap or to bother their neighbors. They're living a very fulfilling lifestyle and they're very unlikely to cause trouble to other people. While people hate HOAs and rules and regulations in their community, when you move into the community that I live in now, you have to read a book of rules and regulations of what you can and cannot do and a ticket amount of how much you're going to pay if you violate those rules. And there's cameras on the entire premises. It means anything you do here that's stupid to bother your neighbors or to break the rules of how we want to live, your behavior will be handled, and not by me, but by the management, which means the person being stupid may not even know where it's coming from. After a few bad incidents, you can be sure that management will cancel that person's lease and they're going to have to leave, which means that the rest of the residents are going to have to deal with their stupidity. While in a neighborhood with no rules and regulations and nobody to enforce them, people who want to be stupid can have free reign to cause destruction and havoc on other people's lives. If you move into a nice neighborhood with rules, regulations, you won't have to deal with that. I've also lived in neighborhoods where some of my neighbors were registered offenders and others were convicted felons. To move into this complex, you cannot have a criminal record, and that just weaves out about 90% of the trouble type people who haven't got their crap together. So one step you can take to not have to deal with bad neighbors is simply to move to a more expensive neighborhood with more rules and regulations and where somebody else handles those trouble people for you, so you don't have to call the law. Tip number 3 is never call the law. And number 3 may not make a lot of sense to you right now, but the moment that you call the law on one of your neighbors, you immediately become the neighborhood. And just about everybody in that neighborhood is going to turn against you, including law-abiding people. So one of the things you can definitely never want to do, never call the law. At no point does that make your living there any easier. And if you have neighbors that are doing things that need the law called on them, you should really hold off on doing that as much as possible. Because from that moment forward, your situation with your neighbors is only going to get complicated and only going to get absolutely worse. 99% of the time, the law will do absolutely nothing, and your neighbor will feel like they took a win by the law coming out and nothing happening. And it's probably not the first time these people, if they're stupid, have dealt with the law, which means the cops are more likely to know that person than they are to know you. The possibilities of you taking a loss here are stacked against you heavily. Tip number 4. Mind your own business. If the people next door might or might not be running a lab in their shed, it is none of your business. If the guy next door likes to get a little physical after a few drinks, none of your business. The less that you intervene with other people's lives, the less inclination they are going to have to care about yours. Not only should you not give a crap about other people and how they're living, but if they try to ask you how you're living, you need to be very direct and letting them know, hey man, I don't give a crap what you're doing outside at midnight with your buddies, tearing apart a motorcycle and pulling stuff out of it. It is none of my business. I don't care. You live your life, I live mine. Tip number 5. If you're encountering trouble with your neighbors, you can always remind them that you're just renting the property, you don't care about the neighborhood, and you're going to be moving soon even if you're not. Putting them into suspense into the fact that your situation there is not a permanent situation, it is only a temporary situation, might just persuade them to realize that there's no need to continue acting hostilities towards you. There's several ways you can prolong the problem. One is by reminding them that you're going to be moving soon. If you have health problems, you can tell them, hey bro, I'm not even going to be here for too long. I got this health problem, or some other type of impending thing is going to happen in your life. That means you're not a permanent figure in this situation. Number 6, never politic with your neighbors. The moment you start to portray that you're an FBI agent and you've done horrible things and you've got contacts that are bigwigs, the moment that you start to politic with your neighbors, that you're from the hood and you don't play no games, the moment that you start to behave in a politicking fashion with your neighbors, when you put on your dancing shoes, you're not going to be able to take them off. And one of the absolute worst things you could do when you're dealing with hostile neighbors is to engage or to politic with them in any type of way. Don't engage them at all. Don't give them the opportunity to engage you. Don't put them on a playing field that's level so that you guys can continue this type of behavior. Your best option is not to politic, not to engage, and not to portray anything at all. Because number 7 is one of the best tactics that you're going to have to deal with people like this, is to be a complete square. Being a thug, being bad, being real, being from the streets, being a cop, being a retired FBI, none of that is really going to help you in this situation. What will help you to deal with a troubled neighbor is actually to be a complete square. If the guy across the street likes to work out and he's got a big aggressive looking vehicle, he is a much better candidate to take on the brunt of your neighbor's stupidity than you are if you're just kind of a square 9 to 5 type person. And if you can divert the attention of that bad neighbor from you and put them on somebody who's more affluent, who's a little bit more of a peacock, then let them be the one to deal with the brunt of the problem. So if you have yourself one of these situations, you can just tell your neighbor, hey bro, I work at Walmart, I got 2 kids, like I can't do this, you know? Like, just let them know that you're a complete square, that you're not a player in the game, you're not going to put on your dancing shoes. It's not going to make it a very fun game for them to play. They're going to want to play this game with somebody who's more of a peacock, more of a tougher figure. Playing the tough guy card doesn't really make you a tough guy. It just makes you a bigger target. Playing the square card actually makes you more of a savage because you're aware of what they're doing and you're finding a coping method that they're not able to touch you. Number 8 goes well with number 7, and it is to not make your neighbors jealous. So if you're able to buy a new car and you're already having trouble with your neighbors, I would hold off on that purchase. Nothing will make a bad neighbor be even worse than spiking jealousy. And a lot of times, well, jealousy just goes hand in hand with stupidity. So if you just want to make your situation worse than what it already is, go ahead and buy a new car. Go ahead and buy a new grill. And that's just going to, well, give that person more fuel for their fire of anger against you. And I hate doing this because I like nice cars, I like having nice things, but when the people around you are so petty, even like something you may not even be aware of, never underestimate the pettiness of people who are malignant. Their stupid decisions and their ability to focus on other people's lives and not to be fully focused on their own means that they're going to be petty about things you may not even notice. Could be your wife, could be your car, could be your kids, could be a new pair of shoes that you bought. Anything that you got going on with your life could easily be a trigger for this person. So don't underestimate the value of you getting in the car with your kids on a weekday. That could make them blow their head through the roof because they're jealous of your free time. They're jealous of your family. Anything they can be jealous of, it's going to bother them and it's going to be more fuel to the fire. And again, never underestimate how petty somebody who's a bad neighbor can be. How something as insignificant as you going for a walk with your dog can be a trigger for this person because they envy your dog, they envy your free time. They're focused on anything that you can do that looks like you're living better than them, because in their mind, the more damage they can cause to your life, the better they are in comparison to you. These types of petty, small-minded people use indirect, subtle clues to win their battles. So you going for a walk with your dog can actually look to them as you're saying, hey, I have free time while you work a 9-to-5 job. And those small little things that you do on a regular basis around your life can actually be looked at as blows to them. So you living your life and you having a fulfilling life, like going for a walk with your dog or taking your kids to the park, that can actually be a huge emotional blow to that person. Emotional blows that you do not want to be giving that person, because the more you give them emotional blows, the more harm they're going to try to inflict upon you. So keeping a low-key profile is a huge thing you're going to have to learn when you're dealing with bad neighbors, because jealousy is usually an underlying cause. They could have a hotter wife than yours and they'll envy your wife. They can have a newer truck than yours and they'll envy yours. It's not about them wanting what you have. It's about them not wanting you to have it, even if it's not as good as what they have. It's not about them. It's about you having it. And you have to be aware of that, because you're dealing them emotional blows a lot of times just by being yourself and you're not even aware of it. A lot of times when you're dealing with bad neighbors, you're not even able to figure out why they don't like you or why they're giving you a hard time, because your mind isn't able to stoop down to their level. But just try to stoop your mind down to their miserable level, and you might start to understand some of the things that you're doing that are adding fuel to the fire, even if you're not doing directly. Number 9, be inconsiderate. A lot of times, one of the craziest things that I have found about bad neighbors is how inconsiderate they'll be towards you. But the moment that you do something that they find inconsiderate, they will immediately have a complaint to voice with you about it. They might play their music loudly the whole night, but if you were to do it one day, they would get mad at you. It is incredible to me how inconsiderate people can be considerate of their own needs. And it doesn't hurt every once in a while for you to be purposely inconsiderate, just to remind them that you can be a pain in the butt as well. You want to be very careful with this one. You don't want to seem like you're engaging them. You're just reminding them that if you did want to engage them, you have the ability to be a jerk yourself. You have to be really careful about how you go about this one, because again, you don't want to engage them, you just want to remind them. And doing something that you have the complete right to do. For example, consider doing something like turning on a loud engine very late at night. Consider doing something that may seem like you're not doing it to engage them, but they'll notice it and they'll know that you have the ability to be a jerk yourself. A lot of times these very stupid people think so little that they don't think how their actions disturb the people around them, because their minds are just that small. So the moment that you irritate them, believe me, they're going to get triggered. They're going to become the Karen. So now they're not that bad guy that was playing rap music at 2 a.m. Now they're the Karen that's going to be calling the cops. And you can tell them something like, hey man, I thought you were a gangster playing rap music. Now you're going to go call the cops on me? I thought you were Would Plies tell his neighbors to turn down their music late at night? Because that's not a gangster thing to do. This is a great opportunity to play the square card and at the same time let them know that you can be a pain in the butt too. Again, just make sure you do it in a way that's not aggressive, almost as if you're surprised that they would get offended by it. Number 10 is knowing when to speak up. And if you start doing this from the beginning, like the first time your neighbor does something like playing music at 2 a.m, if you handle it on the spot, it's a good way to let them know that there's no boundaries to push. If you let them start walking all over you, then they're going to get in the habit of doing it. Setting your boundaries from the start is a great way of preventing their behavior from getting out of hand. Like with the person that came 3 times the day they moved in to ask me for an electrical cord and a screwdriver, and I said, hey man, I'm not friendly. I don't want to give you my stuff. I don't want you coming to my house. Never had problems from that guy ever again, because from the start you drew the line and you let them know you're not going to deal with their behavior. You're not going to engage in that activity. And if you're able to step your foot down from the day somebody shows up, the day a new neighbor moves in across the street, if the day they move in, they decide to park their car on your grass, that's the moment for you to go over there and not so friendly say, hey man, don't park your car on my grass again because it's going to get towed away. I'm not friendly. I'm not cool with you. I don't want your car on my lawn. If you from the get-go let people know your boundaries and that they're not going to cross them, they're not going to want to engage you or play games with you in the long run. They're going to understand that these are your boundaries and you're not going to be a fun target to engage. Because if you let it slide once, you're going to be dealing with this behavior all the time. It's best from the get-go to draw your boundaries. If you're not friendly with people, let them know you're not friendly. If you're not going to let them park their car in your grass, let them know you're not going to deal with it. Because if you don't draw your lines right off the bat, it's going to give them incentive to know that they can keep stepping over you and you're not going to do anything about it. All right, everybody. So those are 10 tips that I've learned in life on dealing with bad neighbors. And the number one thing that I have learned is really just move into decent, better, more expensive neighborhoods where people are more focused on their economy and their family, and don't move into neighborhoods where people's houses are paid off and they have all the time in the world and they don't know what to do with their time. Because even in middle class suburban neighborhoods, I've noticed that 90% of the problems I dealt with were during the weekend because people were gone 9 to 5. So if you have any tips on dealing with bad neighbors, go ahead and hit me up on the comment section. If you did not agree with something I said, I would love to hear your reply as well. And finally, it's been my experience that the best thing you could do to put distance between you and your neighbors is just to move into a more expensive area. If you have more land, more space between you and your neighbors, that's also a huge wall between you and other people. Living in a duplex with your neighbors attached to a wall is great for causing trouble. If that same person lived on a 20-acre piece of land next door and they were in the middle of it and so were you, perhaps you would never have a problem with that person. But those confined spaces lend themselves perfectly for trouble. What has been the worst experience you have ever had with a neighbor? I would love to hear it. And what did you do to resolve that situation? For me, moving has been a great tool between putting distance between me and people I don't want to deal with. Because it seems like whoever moves into that house next, they're going to deal with the same problem that I dealt with. Because these people are just miserable and they want to inflict their misery on everybody around them. I wish there was an app where you could track these types of people, and like if somebody were to move into a neighborhood, they could know where the trouble house is. What a great idea for a business. Because it seems that the best tool that you really have to dealing with bad neighbors is not having them at all by moving to a decent neighborhood.